All right, chapters 18 and 19. A lot gets condensed into these last two chapters, but there's a lot of really, really beautiful moments. Um, so beginning of chapter 18, the return journey. Bilbo wakes up. Um, he's kind of fetched from the battlefield where he was knocked out to Thorin's tent, where he sees Gandalf and um, has this wonderful conversation with Thorin, where they reconcile. Thorin is kind of learned his lesson, knows that he's dying. He got really gravely injured in the battle. He says something really cool. More of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. And this is just a complete about turn from Thorns and the dwarves' attitude this entire time. They went on this massive journey for treasure, and revenge, but mostly treasure. And it just completely changes the focus of their journey if now he's saying that treasure is worth less than food and cheer and song, essentially. It would be a merrier world if people thought that. It's interesting to me that, Tolkien, when he started off on this Hobbit, never really expected or wanted to publish it. And once he did it, ended up being very successful, but that was never really his intent behind this story. He wanted to tell a good bedtime story for his kids, tell a good story to his kids. And it ended up being so much more than that. But I love this reversal of the theme of greed that has been present really throughout this story. As said here by Thorn, who's, I don't want to call him the greediest character in The Hobbit, but he was very, very deeply affected by his desire for treasure. So it's wonderful that he says this here at the end. I want to bring back this idea of consolation, this hope for a happy ending. A lot of terrible things happened. People died in this battle. From our company, we had Thorin and Fili and Kili who died, and a bunch of elves who would have lived for many an age, merry elves who would have lived for many an age. But even though all these awful things happened, it still ended up good. They wiped out a bunch of goblins. Places are going to be safer because of that. There is this hope for renewal, regrowth, both with the men as they were rebuilding Escroth and Dale. Dwarves come back to the mountain. Dane is going to be the king of the mountain now, Thorin's cousin. Things are going to be a lot better in this area because of renewed relationships and a lack of goblins, which is always a good thing. There at the end, Bilbo is wanting to go home. Says the Tookish part was getting very tired, and the Baggins was daily getting stronger. And we've already talked about the balance between these two, how it's important. And I think it's lovely that now that he's accomplished his goal, now that the quest is over, it's time to go back to his hobbit hole. It's time to put up his sword and be comfortable and appreciate being comfortable for a while. Not the last adventure, not the last journey that Bilbo will ever go on, but is the last one of this epic scale with these consequences. So again, I want you to think about the different sides of your personality. Bilbo has, Took and the Baggins, which represents different parts of him, and they don't have to be connected to your family names or your dad's last name, your mom's last name, whatever. They could just be different parts of you. You can name them if you want, or just think about the harmony that should exist between them. And if there's any disharmony, that could be something to work on. I think that's something that we can learn from The Hobbit is the importance for the balance between the different sides of our personality. So I want you to think about that as we're finishing up the book here. So last stage. They've gone on their journey home. Gandalf and Bilbo. They were with Beorn for a while. The Elven King before they have lovely conversations, lovely things happening with all those people. They make it back to Rivendell. The elves are singing because, of course, that's what they do. It's a different song. It's maybe a little bit sadder, but it's also um, talking about the beauty of nature over the beauty of treasure. And why would you go on this quest if the river is just as beautiful as all the gold in the world or whatever? So we definitely see these elves, their attitude um, towards treasure, remembering that the wood elves were considered to be less wise than these elves. These elves being very wise. This is their attitude towards treasure. They don't really care about it as long as they have these other things, which I think is really cool. Bilbo and Gandalf, they get back to the Shire, to Hobbiton. All of his stuff is being auctioned off, which is just hilarious. That they think he's dead, so they're selling all of his stuff. He gets most of his stuff back, but he never regains his reputation. Remember, hobbits are very quizzical, judgmental of hobbits who go on adventures. I think it's very strange. But Bilbo's not worried about that at all anymore, and we've seen that change. He was very concerned about his reputation, both with the dwarves and with the other hobbits. Now he's just very content, being what he is. And I think once he faced a dragon, once he faced spiders and a golem and goblins and death and starvation at every turn, it makes sense that he doesn't really care so much for these things. So I think that's definitely a good change with him. And I love one of the last pages says he was quite content, and the sound of the kettle on his hearth was ever after more musical than it had been, even in the quiet days before the unexpected party. So thinking about what Bilbo gained from this journey, obviously, he brought home some gold and silver, cool sword, cool thing of mail. But beyond that, he appreciates the life he's leading. He appreciates the comfort of his home. His bag inside, I think, is strengthened even because he went on this journey. Obviously, his took side has become more and more a part of his personality. But I think even his bag inside has become stronger because he really, really appreciates these things that he left behind and that he's now regained. He's starts to write more poetry. We finally get another poem from Bilbo, a very lovely one about the road, about the journey and the journey home. This is all because he went on this adventure. He experienced all of these hardships, but he's come home a better hobbit. And I think that is lovely, and great conversation between him and Gandalf and Balin, who could come and visit him there at the end. And we can see that he's a different hobbit at the end of this. And I hope that you are a different hobbit at the end of this class. I've really enjoyed talking about the Hobbit. I hope to be able to talk to some of you in discussions on discussion boards in this class. And yeah, I think I will call it there, and hope to see you again in some of my other book classes or writing classes and what have you. So goodbye.